what I did, I wrote down everything that I could remember in my life pertaining to what I'm about to talk about. My name is John D. Stewart III. For over 40 years, I have been trying to find out what it was that put my childhood life in a spin. For years, I spent sitting, trying to reach back into my memories, trying to recall every moment. This is something that I've been holding in, and I want to let it out before it all comes to an end. First of all, I would like to say that I am a very much believer in God Almighty and Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. My beliefs in God and Jesus have not changed and will remain the same to the end of time and to the end of my life. From the year 1975 to present date, I have sat dwelling, daydreaming, looking into my memory banks, trying to recall all those years in my life that became a part of my everyday life until this date. I'm going to tell you about some things that happened to me and what I can recall from when it all first began to the day I knew it was all over. It was 1964. We had moved into a very small house in Kansas City, Missouri. I can't remember what day or time we moved into the house, but I remember moving from the projects downtown called Wayne Minor. Wayne Minor was a community of high-rise apartments for very low-income black people. We moved from Wayne Minor, and I remember because we moved into a neighborhood where I enrolled in a school called J.S. Chick. The house that we moved into was a 2-bedroom house with a big upstairs. That was turned, the bedroom upstairs was turned into our bedroom. The house had a fairly nice sized front and backyard. We played in that backyard as kids. But at the end of the backyard was some woods, as we called it. The woods was a forest of trees and brushes that extended all the way about a mile from the house, a mile this way, about a mile going this way in all 4 directions. I remember seeing the woods for the first time and can recall being afraid of just having them in back of the house. As far as I remember, no one never went into the woods. It had a creepy look about it. One day, me and my brothers and some kids in the neighborhood played baseball in the backyard. I can remember someone hitting the baseball into the woods. I remember because at that split second, everyone paused. Now the ball went into the woods and everybody's just staring up at the ball and looking like, uh-oh, who's gonna go get it? You know, we was little guys, you know, like 4, 5, 6. Everyone was, you know, in our backyard playing. I guess we all had the same thoughts. Who's gonna go get the ball, you know? Then I remember one of the kids from the neighborhood ran into the woods. He went and got the ball, and we all stared, trying to see, uh-oh. And everybody, I can remember everybody saying, oh, He's crazy. This little guy's crazy. He was a little white kid. Used to stay right next door to us. I can remember somebody saying, "Uh-oh, he's not coming back." He then yelled out, "Hey, there's some apple trees out here." And we was like, "What apple trees?" So, and I can remember because he threw one into the yard, and we looked at it, and it was a red apple. We was like, that's. Everybody looked at it, and it was a bright red apple. We had stopped the game, and everybody stepped slowly into the woods. I mean, we walked, everybody, we in a pack, walking in the woods, And I can recall everybody walking slowly, all bunched together. We in a little group. And I can remember my mother coming out, to the back porch and saying, "Bring me some back." I'm thinking, okay, then it's kind of safe, We all came near the apple trees, and we looked around and could see trees for, everywhere. Just apple trees, red apples, green apples, So we all climbed into these trees, and we sitting and eating apples and, thinking this is a good thing. I can remember one of the kids the one that didn't climb into the tree, he was on the ground, and I remember he said, "There's some strawberries on the ground." And, we was like, "Strawberries too? We having a good time. We got strawberries, we got apples, and we sat and ate and ate and ate." But I could remember thinking that, hey, we in the Garden of Eden or something. It was like, hey, we done found something. I mean, but then after we looked around, it was all kind of fruits of all kind. We had grapes growing on the vines. We had pear trees over on the other side of somebody else's house. We had peach trees. I mean, it was a roll of peach trees. There was dates, strawberries growing on the ground. We had green grapes, red apples, green apples, and I mean, there was just fruit everywhere. Then all of a sudden, I can remember someone yelled out, said, "I see something." And then all of a sudden, he took off running. And I can remember everybody dropping what they was doing and just taking off running, just like jackrabbits. I mean, we ran up just made a path straight out of the woods. Ran straight. The woods, we just ran out of the woods and ran straight into my backyard at that time. And then the woods at that time became off limits. In other words, we had gave it a reputation as hey, this is a scary place. We ain't going in here no more. What made it so bad, the woods was right in back of our house. As time went by, we became curious about the woods, but me and my brothers and other kids, we was getting older, not too old. I say we must have been about still between the ages of 4, 5, 6, and we were still curious about these woods, but there was older guys in the neighborhood that would always come and say, "Hey, let's go explore the woods." So we would explore the woods, and we explored it so much that we had made paths in the ground. I mean, there was paths that we could just follow all through the woods, after so many times of going through the trails, like little trails we just leave behind. And after getting used to being out there, we would have little hiding places, like in the bushes, and sometimes in old dugout tree bark. I can remember old dugout tree bark that went down in the ground that we would always go in and like a little cave. But when the nighttime came, I would get scared. I mean, I had developed the most tremendous fear for the nighttime. Not being outside in the dark, but the fear of my bedroom at night. Me and my brother shared the upstairs bedroom. We all had our own bed. We would talk most of the night. That was until one by one they would all fall asleep. My brother under me used to rock his head to sleep, meaning he would rock like back and forth, side to side, just rock. And I could always tell when he was asleep because he would stop rocking. I guess that was his habit. He had a very bad habit of doing that. I would always know when he would fall asleep because he would stop and then there I would be in the dark. I could not fall asleep. I had to be about 6 years old when it all started. I remember laying in bed for hours all night staring into the darkness. This went on for many nights and many years. I would hate when the nighttime came. When the sun set down and the nighttime came and we had to go to bed, I would get paranoid. Literally, I would be like, oh no. I was the oldest child and I was afraid with fear. No one never knew my fears. One night, I felt something. It was an extremely calm feeling. And I say this, when I say calm, I mean you laying there and you wake up. You laying there, then all of a sudden you can feel the wind blowing, you can hear things, you can hear an ant crawling. You can just hear things, but this type of quietness was like everything had stopped moving. I mean, it was like the sound of the crickets had stopped. The wind wasn't blowing. It was a perfect calm feeling. That's what made me more afraid because I could hear nothing. I could only sense it. I had this keen sense that it was something had made, just like if I was sitting in this room and all of a sudden it just, if everything may get quiet and still, but it's like if a ghost or a presence walked into this room and you could sense it. You have that feeling. I then felt something enter this calmness. I could sense it. And whatever it was could sense me in my bed, in my house. My fears grew so intense that to this date, I suffer with a phobia. Now that's something I never told anybody. I've become a very, very extremely quiet person. Now I can get loud and I can talk when I want to, but most of the times, after so many years in that calmness, I could just wait to feel the presence. It's like you can almost feel what's wicked or what's not wicked. That type of feeling. That's something I never told anyone. I knew it was coming from the woods. I just didn't know what it was. I would be laying in bed staring into the night, everyone asleep. Then all of a sudden, this calm feeling would come. It wouldn't just come after everybody would fall asleep. It would come like in the night, like I would say between 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm talking about when everybody is just completely out. I had to be about age 6. I was so afraid, so scared, and didn't understand what was happening at that age. This went on for years. I mean, it went on for a little while. But I then realized that it didn't matter if I was asleep or awake. Once this calm feeling came, I would instantly know it was about to start. This calm feeling that I would get didn't just come. I only got that feeling when I knew they were coming. This calm feeling was like being in a space or a room, and then all of a sudden you could hear the most infinite sound. It was like something entered not just the space in my room, but the space in the neighborhood, the space in the house, and I can sense them coming. And I say that, it was like, it was like a presence was coming, and I knew they was coming. I could feel it. I don't care if they was down the street. I could feel them coming, just like that. And I would be scared. I didn't know what I was afraid of. I would just be petrified with fear. Never in my life I'd be like, slow this fear down. I couldn't take it no more. It was coming out of me. One night, everyone was in their deep sleep. I can remember just laying there in my bed, not able to sleep. It had to be about 3 o'clock in the morning. As I laid there in bed, that calm feeling came over me again. And I began to fringe with terror. I mean, literally I was like, I couldn't see nothing, I couldn't hear nothing, it was like pressure. It was like a calm feeling. It was like it's like being in too much space and too much space around you. And I can't even describe it. It was like space, fear, being in a closed space. I can't describe which one it was, but I can remember, to this day, I can still remember that feeling. I mean, I was more afraid and scared than I ever been in my life. I mean, here I am, 6 years old, and I'm like, I can't even stand the darkness. I got so scared that I thought my soul was going to leap out of my body. I mean, literally, it was times when I would just, I would be so scared, I'd be like, my teeth would be, I was like, and I was little, I didn't understand what was going on. I couldn't see nothing but the dark. Here I am laying in the dark, but I knew something was in the room. I didn't know what it was. But wasn't nothing in the room at this time. I then remember raising up in my bed and looking around the room, and it was dark, and I could see my brothers laying over in the bed. My bed was like always right here. Now I could always look straight ahead and see the stairways, and it was like a wall partition right here where you couldn't, if you walked upstairs, you couldn't just see my brothers and laying there. You probably could see me at this angle. But I remember the calmness came, and I could sense something or someone approaching my bed. Now it was dark one night, and I could feel somebody. I guess I was laying in bed, and I remember laying in bed, and I could sense somebody approaching the house. Now I couldn't see anything. I wasn't looking out no window, and I wasn't looking around the room, and I wasn't looking out the window to see if anyone was coming, because I was too afraid to move out of my bed. I could just sense something approaching. I could just feel them. It was a strong feeling or a strong presence. I mean, whatever it was, they was like giving off some strong vibes, whatever it was. It gave me the feeling of pure terror. I mean, when I felt that feeling, I would get literally froze. I mean, I would literally pee on myself, because I would be trembling so hard. I trembled and was afraid that I wetted my bed many times. But this time I remembered, because I felt that presence and I didn't want to move. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was something had pierced the dimension of this calmness and was in the neighborhood. Wasn't in my house yet. Wasn't in the house. But it was in the neighborhood somewhere. Either on the side of the house, above, or in the woods somewhere. But it had to be coming from the woods, because that was the first thing I was thinking. As I lay there in bed shivering with fear, I then heard the sound of footsteps coming up the steps. Now I say this because I can remember when we was a kid, my father would always come up the steps, and we would hear him come up the steps. It would be like, and we'd be like, "Uh-oh, here come Dad." You know. Anytime he come upstairs, you know, he had his belt, or we was in trouble, or he's coming to wake somebody up to don't tell it. But when I heard the steps, I can remember that night so well, because I almost swallowed my heart. I had pulled the covers over my head. I mean, because I didn't, you know, if it was my father, I didn't know what it was. But I pulled the covers over my head, and I laid there not making a sound. Now, whoever it was or whatever it was came over and stood over my brothers and me. It came over, and then it stood over my brother, and I felt it, because my bed was like this, you know, 3 beds lined up, and I felt them go over and just stand there, and I knew they had to be looking down at them. Whatever it was, then came over and stood over me. And boy, you talking about shivering of the worst kind. I laid there and shivered so hard that almost stopped breathing. I mean, I didn't move. I didn't do nothing. I may have held my breath for about a minute or two, then began to think. They thought they knew I was asleep, but then I knew they knew I wasn't asleep. It was like I was laying there shivering and shivering, and they standing over me, and I'm wondering if they're gonna grab me, or I'm wondering if I have to yell or what. I didn't even hear when they went downstairs. At first I thought it was my father. He would always come upstairs, in the middle of the night drunk. He would then come up the stairs to our room and make everybody get up, do some housework, clean up do something crazy, or even come up there with a belt, whatever. But that next day I went to school. I thought about that night all day, wondering who came into our room and stood over us. I remember not being able to pay attention in the class because all I could think was of that night. Who was in our room that night? Who was that in our room? I remember coming home that evening to find out that my father didn't even come home yesterday, that day or that night. And that he was out all day, all night. I remember not being able to pay attention. My mother very seldom came upstairs. She would only come upstairs to clean it up. But that next night came. I was so afraid to go to bed that I just sat there at a window and stared out most of the night. I mean, I would just go to the window with a chair and just look out. I remember sitting there just looking out and looking up. I then looked up at the stars. I saw a star moving. I mean, literally, I just saw a star. Just come across. Just come across. It was strange to me because I can recall this star moving and then stopping directly over our house. Now I'm looking out the window now. The window used to have a screen, but the screen wasn't there, so I'm looking out an open window. So I remember sticking my head out the window and looking up at the star, and the star like right above our house. I remember watching this star, and then all of a sudden here come another star. It just literally, these two stars was like, not one star, but now we got two stars right there. And I'm looking up at these stars, and these stars moving towards and I was watching them, and man, they became like one star, one little bright star. I can remember sitting there for hours, watching these stars. Yeah, it got late, and I'm still sitting there trying to watch these stars because these stars was like right above the house, and I'm looking out. And then I remember everybody had fallen asleep. And I'm still sitting there looking up at these stars. And my attention was focused so much. I remember sitting there. I then remember going downstairs. I just got to the point where I just got up And I remember walking to the kitchen and going into the refrigerator. And after I left the kitchen, I walked to the front door. I walked through the living room to the front door because the kitchen was like this way, and I had to just walk across, and I'm still about 5, 6 years old. And I remember because I remember when I walked over to the front door, it had to be like a summer night. It was real warm. Or it could have been a spring night. I then opened the front door. And I usually do this because I would check to see if my father was home, or, you know, just to look out to see what the neighborhood looked like. But when I opened the door, I can recall, I cracked the door and I can recall seeing 4, whatever they were, I would say human-like, whatever, beings standing right there at the door. It was like a step down on the porch, so we had to step down maybe a step, and they just standing there. I could tell they were grown, but they were real small. They was like real small. Now at that time, 5, 6 years old, I was a little guy, but they was small, and I can remember their great features. I'd say I'm about 5, 6 now. At that time, I had to be about maybe 3 feet tall. They were smaller than me. And as soon as I caught a glimpse of their eyes and their head, I ran like hell. Now my mother's room was like right off from the front door. So the front door is here, and I ran to her room and I was so little that I crawled literally under her bed, and I crawled so far back under the bed. I can recall seeing my father, though, when I entered the room so fast. I remember glancing up at the bed and seeing him laying in the bed. But I remember seeing my father sleeping there. My father was a heavy sleeper. When he sleep, couldn't nothing wake him up. He was in the bed with my mother. As I laid there under my mother's bed, I peered out. Now I'm under the bed, and I'm peering out. That same old calm feeling came over me. Here I am under the bed. I'm under the bed now. I'm squeezed under, and then all of a sudden, here comes that feeling. I'm like, I had crawled under the bed so quietly that I didn't even wake my mother and them up. I was shivering with pure terror. I was like, and I did it so smooth and quietly that I didn't really want to wake them up, because I didn't want them, to wake up and see whatever it was or whoever it was, which is something I should not have done. But what I saw, I couldn't even imagine, because it was like I'm staring out. Now I'm under the bed, and I only got this much space to look out, because I'm under the bed and I'm looking, and all I see is legs, little legs, running through our house, like, and I'm looking, and at that age, I'm thinking, this is a cartoon. I'm under the bed. I'm way back up under the bed. I'm like way under the bed, like. And I'm looking. It's like looking at a cartoon, but it was, and I'm thinking, wait a minute now. There's some kids in our house. Some kids done came in our house, and and walking through our house. You know, but their legs was, they didn't have no shoes on, or they didn't have no, their legs were real thin. And I remember looking out and I see these legs, and the first thing I got to thinking that, oh, one of them's gonna come into the bedroom and mess with my mother and them, you know. And I can recall one did come to the bed because I remember seeing the legs. Now I thought that whatever it was gonna bend down and look under the bed. That was one fear that stayed with me to this day. And I was like, you know, at that time I felt like I was gonna have strength enough to raise this bed up, flip it over, and take off running. As I laid there, I got to thinking that one might come into the room. I couldn't even shout. I couldn't even scream out. I just laid there watching as they walked around in our house. I watched as they entered the kitchen. I laid there, I literally laid there for hours. I literally laid there, like, say for instance, it started maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. I laid there and I waited to see if anybody or whatever it was that was going to come out of the kitchen. And I laid there for hours. I then laid there and I could see the sun peek through the window. You know, it started to get light. I waited and didn't see anything or anyone, so I crawled quietly from under my mother's bed and ran out of the room. As the day came in, I remember getting up and going back upstairs. Everyone was still asleep, so it had to be a Saturday or Sunday morning because everyone would sleep late on those days. I looked in my mother's room and saw my mother and father were still asleep. I then walked slowly to the kitchen and looked in. The refrigerator door was wide open. I remember that. It's like somebody had went in our refrigerator and just left it open. I then looked over and saw that the kitchen back door was wide open and the back door to the porch leading outside was wide open. In other words, we had the kitchen, then there was a back door from the kitchen leading to the back porch that had a back door leading out to the backyard. Both of these doors was wide open and I could see straight to the woods. Straight, I stood there and I looked straight back to the woods. I can recall wanting to run. I remember when I saw that everything was open, I was like, somebody been in our house. Somebody was here in our house, you know. So I was thinking, no, I'm the oldest. I better go close these doors, you know. So I went and closed the doors. I went and closed the doors. Someone was in our house. But this went on for years. I can recall this going on for years. Those first few years were the first worst years because I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that this was going on and it was like a routine thing. I was young, scared, afraid, and didn't know what was, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to handle the situation. I didn't know how to think through the situation. All I knew was fear. That was the only thing that kept me from knowing what was going on. And for 3 nights out of a year, they would come and make their visitations. Now I say that because they would come. When it first started off, it started like they would come for 3 days, and that would be it for the whole year. Nothing else would be going on after that. For those 3 nights, I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't think. Those days lived on in my life to this day with pure terror. I could think about that, but now I'm older. See, I can't. I'm wanting to know what it was. Now when I think about it, I don't even know what I was afraid of, but fear kept me from knowing what it was. All I knew was they would come to our house. Now the rest of the days in the year were just normal days. They would go by like nothing happened. I wasn't afraid of dark. I'd go upstairs, sleep, hey, get in my bed and go to sleep. I could sleep through the night and wake up the next day, go to school, like it wasn't nothing. Every night was peaceful. It was just another night. And the woods didn't even seem so scary to me. I mean, the woods was just another, part of the house now. Only those 3 days out of the year, and they would come and be gone. It wasn't no particular time of the year when they would come. They would just come anytime and do whatever they had to do and be gone in 3 days. I can remember one year getting so relaxed with being able to sleep, that, hey, I'm comfortable in my bed. I remember snuggling up in my bed, and one evening I remember going to sleep. But while in my sleep, I sensed that calm feeling over me again. I mean, I could be in my sleep, and then all of a sudden it's like you wake up, and all of a sudden I can remember rising up out of my sleep, breathing hard, like you'd be like, and my eyes is buck staring, like, and you knew I had this, this calm feeling would come, and I remember rising up, but I remember then I looked around the room and then over at the window. I couldn't sense, well, actually I could sense they was back. I say they now because that's what I know now. But then I didn't know that they was making that, that approach onto me. I say they now. But then I wouldn't have said they. I didn't know what it was then. This went on for 3 days out of a night, out of a year. 3 days out of a year. And it went on for 10 years. From 1964 to 1974. I can remember very well because I wrote it down. One year I remember waiting on this kind of feeling. Now I got older. And I wanted to know what it was. I mean, I'm feeling this feeling, and I'm having this fear, but I'm getting older now, and I'm playing football and basketball and having fights and not scared of people, and I'm wondering about this kind of feeling because it comes on me. And one night, that feeling came late in the night. This time it came with more fear. Well, at this time I was more afraid than ever because I can always remember the night, but it got where I couldn't remember what happened during the night. I would always remember going up to the next day, or the sun, or waking up, or coming up just as the sun was peeking over. It would never go into the daylight. I remember being at school and remember being in gym. And while in gym, I was changing my clothes, and I noticed that I had 2 punched holes in my legs. Now, I will get to that in a minute, but, well, I can remember I had 2 punched holes on each side of my leg, in my upper thigh of my groin. At first, I didn't think nothing of it until that evening when I would get home, and I took a light, maybe a little flashlight or something, and I got to looking at these little holes in my legs, little holes like right on both sides. And I remember picking at them for quite some time, and maybe with a little, I don't know what I had at the time, but maybe it was some tweezers or something. I can remember doing this for several days until I saw something. I got to picking it out. Now whatever I picked, I was picking and I was picking and I picking out something. I grabbed something and I pull it out, and it looked like a little piece of I'll say wood, but it may not even been wood. It probably looked like wood to me at that time, but when I think about it now, I don't think it was wood. It was a little piece of something, but whatever it was, I couldn't get the rest of it out. And that was on this side of the leg. I remember. I still got the spots to this day. And on this side, I kept picking and picking. I couldn't, whatever it was in there. Now, these holes was like, I mean, I could literally pull the skin up and go down to the muscle and try to pull it up, and I couldn't get whatever it was that was in my leg out. And it kind of bothered me because I was like, the hell, what is that? How'd that happen? I wasn't in no pain or nothing. I just knew that I had 2 direct holes directly from each other, like right in my upper thigh. I say I write down it had to be about 2, 3, 4 centimeters, but I don't think it was that big. That's kind of big. But that night I fell asleep. After that calm feeling came over me again. But this time it came like with the quickness. It wasn't hesitating. Like when the calm feeling would come, it would come like a calm feeling, like everything is gonna like spread out, move out the way. Here comes God. Or something like that, and it just slowly moves out the way. But this time, it came like, move, get out the way, And I laid back. I could sense they was back. I mean, they was back. I raised up out of my bed, and I was scared. I raised up like, uh-oh, here they come. I was scared. I was like scared. I could hear them coming. Not coming, but when I say hear them, it was like I could read their minds, or they could read my mind. But this time, they were mad. I could feel this wickedness or evil. It was like an evil presence on his way. Just, you did something wrong. You did something, and I could tell. I could hear them in my thoughts, but I couldn't see them. They may have been. Now I could probably still. They probably were still in the woods somewhere, or across the street, or down or across the yard when I heard these voices, but I could hear these thoughts in my head. And one, I can recall one of them saying, "That big head, something he called me." And I could sense they were mad at me about something. Then one said, "You didn't put it in too deep." Now this was coming in my head. And I'm thinking, what? I can hear this and I don't see nobody. And at that split second, I start to run like hell. I mean, I literally started to just, but I got to thinking, where am I going to go? And I was frozen, I was stiff. I didn't realize that they was mad at me for taking whatever it was that was in my thigh out. That was my first thought. I was like, I messed with something. Did I mess with something? And I'm a little guy and I'm tripping. I'm literally tripping on this. And I'm like, man, and I'm literally scared. Now I'm talking now because I can remember, but back then I couldn't even comprehend what was going on. I couldn't even think straight. All I can remember was walking in the wood, and after that moment, I could just remember walking in the woods. Now, I knew I was walking with somebody, but I didn't know, I didn't look over at nobody, or I couldn't. I think I was maybe in a trance, or I could just only look straight, just like straight. I could still think, but I couldn't move. I could use my mind and I could ask the question with my mind, but I couldn't move my body. I could just only think straight, whatever was going forward. I can recall not being able to move or do what I wanted to do, like run. I wanted to run, but I didn't think about running. I would think about just, it was like I knew everybody around me, but I just couldn't do what I wanted to do. I just remember, and at that moment, I remember walking up to what looked like a black wall. At that time, it looked like a black grayish wall. I mean, I stopped right in front of it. And the wall was so tall at that time. And I could look down the wall and it was like a long wall. And I could look this way and then the wall was real long. And I remember standing there for a few seconds. And I remember hearing all the chirping of the crickets. Now we was in the woods. Now I know we was in the woods because I could hear the crickets chirping, sounding like millions. It was like crickets, creaking, and I'm standing like right in front of this wall. And then all of a sudden, I felt the impression that they wanted me to go in. Now I'm thinking, what? Then a section of the wall where I was standing melted. I mean, it was like first it was like water running, and then all of a sudden it opened up to an opening. It was like metal, like the metal wall melted, and it just opened up to an opening. It then opened up where I was able to see on the other side. I remember standing there for a few seconds, and I could hear I still remember the crickets chirping, loud. I mean, it sounded like, when summertime comes, we have that infestation of locusts. That's what it was, and they They was like millions of them. I can remember hearing them. I remember stepping in to the doorway, but first I remember sticking my head in. I remember sticking my head in and looking in. I mean, literally, I didn't go in. I just remember sticking my head in, and when I stuck my head in, I noticed that when I stuck my head in, the atmosphere on the inside was real calm. I mean, it was like, when I stuck my head in, I couldn't hear nothing, but nothing. Then I'd come back and I could hear all the chirping of the locusts is still chirping. I'd stick my head back in, and I was like, what? You know, it was real peaceful and quiet on the other side. I quickly ducked back out. I could still hear the crickets loud and sound in the woods. I then took a step through the door. Now I literally just walked in. I can remember stepping through. I can remember that. It was like I stepped through a vacuum. It was like when I walked in, and I walked in through a vacuum, but I was on the inside. And I couldn't, once I got on the inside, the door was still open, but I couldn't hear nothing. I'm standing on the inside and the door is open and I can't hear nothing, but I took a step back and I could still hear the crickets, and I was like, wait a minute. And I stepped back through and I'm on the other side, and I'm like, and the door is wide open. You know, the opening is open. I was afraid to even look around the room once I got on the inside. I had stepped into this room and it didn't have no furniture, no windows, but I could feel, once I stepped in, it was a wide open space. Now I scanned the room. It didn't have no corners. It was kind of round. It had it didn't have no upper level, but I could see where the wall turned into the roof. But I could feel, once I got inside this room, I could feel the presence of 1,000 eyes just staring at me from every angle, from the back, from every, just staring at me. And I can remember crying out. I was saying, no, I don't want to go. I mean, I'm 5 years old, 6 years old, and no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm talking now. I'm telling her I don't want to go, and no, I don't want to go. I'm repeating this over and over and over, and I'm like, I don't want to go. And whatever happened, I can't even recall. I can just remember being back in my room crying. I was crying. No, I'm still crying, still scared. No, I don't want to go. No, I didn't want to go. Just like that. Them holes stayed open in my leg for years, for at least a year. I was not able to get the rest of whatever it was out. It was like it had attached to me or evaporated into my skin or leg or whatever. One day, I looked down and the hose was gone. I can still see the scars. I worry now that whatever it was might still be in me to this day. Some nights I can't recall, and I try hard to remember, but some nights I do remember. because I would awaken and be standing in the woods. I believe the reason why I remember certain things is because of the tremendous fear that came over me at that time. I mean, the fear that I would get would be where I would just tremble to the core. I mean, literally to the core. I mean, I would be so scared. Now, I done sat for many years probing my memories, trying to figure out what all this was about. The years went by and they would come. I grew older. I may have been about 7 or 8 now. At the time when I can recall being in the kitchen at night and had the strangest feeling that somebody was watching me through the back porch window. I didn't develop a fear for going out to the kitchen or to the back porch at night. Later one year, my mother put up some curtains over the windows. That helped some, but I would always go out and look out and stare into the woods. As time went by, and after those 3 days of fear went away, I would sit and dwell, wondering. I was getting older, and the older I got, the more I wanted to know what it was that was bothering me for those 3 days. I used to wonder if our house that we lived in was haunted. I mean, I used to wonder this. I would sit up all night looking for ghosts. But every other night would be just a normal night. Until those 3 days. I remember telling myself, that's what it was. That's what this is. This is a ghost. It was a ghost. Then I would then request to spend the night with my grandmother. But, you know, thinking about ghosts, I didn't want to be in the house no more. I was like, okay, Grandma, can I come stay with you? She had a newer house, a much bigger, and I felt more safer over her house. That was until one night I was playing late in the front yard at her house. And I happened to look up to the sky and I noticed 3 stars coming across. And I stopped and stared. Seconds later, I then saw maybe a cluster of stars, maybe 10, maybe 30, moving past over my grandmother's house. Now, I think I was about 10 at that time. So the date had to be 1969. I can recall running to get my grandmother. After that night, I then knew something strange was going on. I was 10 years old and I was kind of a little bit more, tuned to what's going on in the world. One year, I can recall snow being on the ground. So it had to be the winter time. I can remember telling myself, I'm gonna find out what is going on. I could do my own investigation here. So one night, I laid in bed and I stayed awake late into the night. That is, it was weird because that calm feeling came over me. it just came. It was just one of those nights. I caught that feeling. And my first instinct was to be scared. Here it comes. Oh, get ready. No. But I was older, so I was able to withstand a little fear. Not much, but a little. And I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to see. So I could remember calming my fears down, trying to come out of the fear. And for that moment, I wasn't afraid for a moment. I laid there in bed listening. I then heard them coming. Now I say them because it was a winter night and snow was on the ground. I recall with great details the snow crunching as somebody walked across the backyard, coming from the woods to the house, on the side of the house, approaching the house, and I could hear it crunch. Somebody stepping. Now I'm saying to myself, who's in our backyard? Who, what? You know, I could hear them. I tried my best not to panic because first thing I wanted to do was like panic, run. But I wanted to see. I was upstairs in the upstairs window. But I was getting scared to even look. I was at my window and I remember the window was open. The window was open and I could hear them. Crunch, 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 crunch. And then as the sound got closer to the window, now we upstairs on the second floor. I say it had to be maybe 8 or 9 feet up. The window had to be about 10 feet up. And from the ground. It was an upstairs window, so I figured if I looked out the window and I could look down and see whoever it was coming across. But as I came to the window, I then felt that them getting closer to the window, coming up. I then got up enough courage to get up and walk over to the window. But as I raised up slowly to look over the window sill, it was weird because as I raised up, I got the feeling that if I raised my head up and look, whatever it was going to raise their head up and be looking right in my face. And at that moment, that first thought, I just went and dived into my bed. That's all I remember. But it was strange to me because they didn't even come up to bother me. They didn't even, if they did, I don't even remember. But the next morning, I remembered because I got up real quick and I ran outside. Now the snow was fresh, and I figured whatever it was had left footprints in the snow. I remember running into the backyard, I went out the front door and I ran around the house. And there was fresh footprints in the snow. Now I walked along these tracks which led all the way back to the woods. But it was strange because I then looked at these tracks. Now these tracks, I can't say this much or that much, but these at that time they was real little bitty tracks with. Now my step at that time, I could take big step, but these were, you know, little steps, little bitty steps, little bitty steps. I looked at the tracks. They was real small. But then I noticed that there was an animal track that had walked alongside of these tracks. Now I remember this, and I'm saying to myself, well, these are little tracks, and this is an animal track, and this is my track, and they led all the way back to the woods, and the animal, whatever kind of animal it was, had followed them all the way back, all the way up into the woods. Now I followed the track all the way back to the end of our yard, and I stood there looking as far as I could look to see how far the tracks was going to go up into the woods. And I just stood there. That was enough to let me know that somebody or something, whatever it was coming in from the woods. And I heard them. Now I can't recall, really I can't recall anything at that time of the year, like 1969, or aliens, UFOs. We at that time, we only knew of Martians. You know, everybody always talking about Martians. They didn't talk about UFOs or nothing like that. I can't recall people talking about stuff like that. Only spacemen and Martians and stuff. Those footprints in the snow were smaller than almost baby feet. It was enough to let me know that somebody was walking through our yard. Time goes on, and I was getting older. I can recall the visitation changing. Instead of them coming for 3 days, they would come only 1 day. When it all started, I can recall 3 to 4 human-like beings coming to our house. With time, only 2. But I can remember one event, 1 year. It was 1970. And me and my friend, someone that lived in the neighborhood, had just got a new SS Nova. I remember that old SS Nova. You probably know who it is. Once they heard it's a SS Nova, because he was the only person in the neighborhood with SS Nova. He fixed it up with big wheels, made it like a race car. And one day we went riding. We was riding around an area called the 10 Caves. And if you say the 10 Caves to people in our neighborhood, they would know what you're talking about, because only a few people knew about the 10 Caves. And those were the people in the neighborhood, maybe people in our grade school. The 10 Caves were some caves that were left abandoned from the past. We called these the 10 Caves because after exploring the area, we found 10 entrances into these caves. And everyone in the neighborhood knew about the 10 Caves because we would always go play in them. I mean, we even went walking all the way back into the darkness of these caves. Many times. And there was a time we would come down there and there was hobos living down there. You know, we would sneak down there. They would never see us. They probably saw us, but they didn't ever bother us. But we would always worry that they was going to bother us because, you know, kids off in, you know, into the wilderness, and here's some nuts living off in the woods somewhere. You know, we figured nowadays kids get bothered like that, but we didn't ever get bothered by it. But I remember me and my friend, we was riding that evening, and we was riding along a road near the 10 caves. Now the caves was a little ways from the house, and it was, mostly a wooded area. You might have a dirt road down there. And I remember him driving, but he didn't ask me if I wanted to drive. Now he's racing his car up and down this dirt road, we riding, having fun, and he's, driving his car and showing off. And at that time, he asked me to drive. Now I think I had to be about 10, 11, maybe 12 years old. But before he let me drive, he drove around the dirt road showing me how fast his car was, and burning rubber and speeding and trying to make the dirt fly up in the air. I can remember this. But he let me drive. I wasn't no driver, because at that age, I could drive. My father was letting me drive. During those years, you learn to drive early, but I wasn't no good driver. I could drive. And he let me drive. I then got behind the wheel and started the car. Now I took off slowly up the dirt road. I went about a half mile, then turned around and drove back to where the caves were. And as I was driving back down the road, I came back up the road, and I noticed a bright light coming up the back of me. Now, my first thought was like, I glanced over my shoulder and looked. I was like, oh no, no. And I'm like, no, this ain't happening. All of a sudden, I'm driving, and all of a sudden the car just, it shuts off, and I'm just coasting to a stop. And my friend, he thought I did something to the car, And then I looked to the left. I looked over again at the light, and I could see it coming down. And then, I'm thinking, no. I didn't feel no calm feeling or nothing at this time. I'm like, no. And then I look over to my friend, and he's out. He's like, he's out, and I'm like, and then I look over at the light, and the light is coming down alongside of me. Now I can remember, because the light is coming down, and when I'm looking at it, it's like flat, and the top part is real dark, black, dark, gray, dark, and the bottom is dark gray, but the middle was lit up like a light. But the closer it got, that light turned to a blue. Now the light started coming down alongside the car. I could see it must have been about 50 feet away from the car. And the caves were like 100 yards that way, right there. As it came down, I began to see the shape of the object. It was a bright bluish spacecraft. And I say that because I saw it. It was blue, bright lights, and had windows in the front of it. Now, I say the front of it, but it seemed like the windows went all the way around it. But I say the front of it because I watched this thing land. Now, I could see somebody standing in the window. And the weirdest thing about this is because when I first saw it, the first thought in my brain, it was like something said, "Your presence is needed in the office." And I was like, no, you know. And my heart was beating. I'm talking about thumping so hard that it literally jumped out of my chest. I would like to read this word by word because I can describe it, but I can read it too. As it came down, I could see someone or someone's body in the window. I watched as it landed right in front of the entrance of the caves. I mean, now the caves, the spaceship went and landed like over there. And I mean, I was like, I'm watching this, and I'm breathing hard and thumping hard, and I'm wondering, you know, I'm trying to play it off. And I'm breathing real fast. I didn't notice, once I looked again, I didn't notice, now it's dark. It's not daylight, it's dark, but it's like a twilight moon and I could see. And when I looked over here, I could see the beings. Beings, I say beings like humanoid, beings, aliens, whatever it was. Whoever they were, approaching the car. Now, I couldn't see them at first. My eyes tried to focus. I tried to wake my friend up. I was like, I'm literally shaking him. I'm like, man, wake up, man. I'm screaming and hollering. But he wouldn't wake up. I then looked over and saw them, and they was like on the car, and I could see him. I mean, I could see him. I mean, they stepped with a stride. They was tall, and they stepped like, not like their arms was long. I was even able to see the spacecraft where they was right behind them as they walked over this mound toward the car. And I remember that a railroad track right there. And they came across that railroad track. They looked tall, long in nature, very thin, with large heads and black, bright eyes. They walked with a stride. Then all of a sudden, I remember one came up close to the car. And then he reached in through the car. Like his hand reached in. And I'm over on my friend screaming and hollering. And I'm thinking I'm doing like this, you know, trying to get him off, and not to touch me. And I remember my friend, who he must have been unconscious or something, wouldn't wake up. I couldn't figure out why he wouldn't wake up, but I'm all on top of him. I'm backed up, screaming out, and this being is literally reaching through the window for me. And I'm yelling and yelling and yelling. And I remember my hand touching his hand. For some reason, I'm doing like this. All of a sudden, our hands make contact like this. It was like, it wasn't like he was grabbing me or reaching for me. He just got to touching me like this, and we touching each other. Like, you know, first it was, you know, and it was like his hands was telling me to calm down, relax, calm down, it's okay, calm down. And all of a sudden, we just touching each other, like touching, just touching, just touching each other, like, and feeling each other, like, okay. And I'm breathing hard. I'm like, okay, all right, okay, I'm breathing. Oh, don't hurt me now, please. And I'm touching it. He's touching me, like, okay, it's okay, okay. And I'm sitting there, and I felt his hand touch mine, and it was like a touch of something grabbing me, or it wasn't like somebody grabbing me or yanking me out. It was a gentle touch, more like a friendly greeting. I felt his hand touch mine. And it was not like the touch of somebody grabbing me or yanking me out of the car. It was more like a gentle touch, more like a friendly greeting. I felt his hand, he felt my hand. It was like we was touching to get to know each other, kind of touching. Like two animals that would just walk up on each other. Then all I remember was the other being walking up. Now I remember him because his head was so big when he looked in the car, I was like dazed by how big his head is and how bright his eyes were. And all I remember was a flash, like psh, a bright light. Psh. The next morning came, and I remember running out of the house. I ran over to my friend's house, who had the car, the SS Nova. And he came out, and he told me he was, he didn't even remember driving home. And that he thought I drove home. That night lives on with me so very clearly that I will never forget. After that night, I was very happy. I was happy because I was more happier than I ever been. It was a good feeling because I could remember, and I was able to remember. I was able to see with my eyes. Literally, when I saw. I can't remember what happened after the bright light flash, but I remember coming up the next day. I remember them walking up to me. I remember the craft coming down. I remember them walking up to the car. I remember down there at the 10 Caves. Now, when I tell people about this, they think I'm crazy. And some people I don't even talk about it. Because a lot of people don't, aliens is like, if you ain't talking about God, then don't talk about no alien, because you'd be crazy, and I don't, because this, some people just don't. I only told a few people though, and a few people that I have even talked to about this, they, we sit and talk about it, I can sit and tell them. But I saw them, and that what made me happy. I was satisfied for that moment. I was satisfied. I then started to look forward to them coming. I think I was just glad they was coming, until one year. I noticed that the year went by and I didn't have that calm feeling come over me no more. Another year went by and no more calm feeling. I mean, I think it was about 1972 when I realized that they had stopped coming to see me. I would sit there at the window at night and watch the stars just to see if I could see any stars moving. There wasn't no movement. There was nothing. The 3 days had just it was no more of the encounters. Every night was a good night. I mean, one night I stayed up all night, waiting and watching and listening. For several nights I would do this until I just got tired of sitting up all night. I did this for several nights until I got too tired to even stay awake. I just told myself, they gone. They just gone now. It was until 1974 when I was laying in bed. My mother had let me move into the bedroom downstairs. I remember coming home one evening. I had took the shortcut home through the neighbor's yard so I could get home a little quicker. The sun was still up and it was not quite about to set. But I then noticed a star twinkling, coming, well, a light, I would say, twinkling, coming from the backyard. And I walked to the backyard and I looked and I didn't see anything. I then noticed, I then walked to the end of the backyard and I stood there looking into the woods, like there was a fence here and I'm standing at the end of the woods and I'm looking into the woods. And in that instant, I was standing in front of a round silver ball. I say silver. On the ground. I mean, this ball wasn't like a ball. This ball was like a spear. I say silver because it had to look like it was made of mercury or something. It wasn't like a shiny silver. It was like silver, like this type of silver could bob, you know. But it was a bit larger than me, and I could see that part of it was open like a doorway. At first, I was afraid. That fear was that same kind of feeling that came over me again. But I was a little older, and I saw the door open, but something compelled me to go in. So I went in. When I first walked in, the sound of the outside, you know, like the last time, I would walk through the door and it was complete silence. It was like calm silence, you know. And I was thinking I think at that time I was ready to be calm, but you know, I was wanting to know. But this time I could see what it was. It was a little ball, but when the door was still open, I entered what I say was a very small room. inside. It was just small enough for me to stand up in. And I had this happy feeling. You know, I was happy because I was clear-minded. I could see everything around me, and I was like, okay, yeah. And I noticed that there was a chair in the middle of this room, of this sphere. But this chair, I noticed, wasn't just a chair. This chair was like molded to the whole room. It wasn't like, here's a chair and I can scoot it over here. It was like this chair was molded into the ground or molded into the floor of the whole room. And I remember walking up to this chair, and the room I say must have been about 8 feet by 9 feet, and about 6 feet tall to the ceiling, maybe a little taller than that. And I remember having this crazy feeling. The opening had slowly closed, and I didn't get afraid. I mean, it literally just started closing. And it was closing. I wasn't looking at the doorway closed, but I'm still looking around the room, and I could just still sense the door closing on me, and I'm inside now. It's closing. You know, I knew what it was. It was like they wanted, it was like they was waiting on me. And I didn't know for sure what it was. I then slowly went over to the chair and I sat in the chair. Now at first, at that split second, the chair felt like it was a perfect fit. It was like it was made for me to sit in. I then dropped my head like, no man, this is not happening. This is not real, you know. And I'm like, no. I then quickly jumped up because I had a quick thought. I raised up out the chair and I jumped up. I then remember saying to myself, no way. I'm like, no way, no man, no. I then walked over to where the door was. The door was closed, so there were some windows or some outlets where I could look out. And I could see out. I looked out and I could see the sun. When I looked out, I could see the sun on the horizon. You know, and I'm saying to myself, well, I'm kind of up. Where's the ground at? You know, I'm thinking. I couldn't believe my eyes though. And I had to focus my eyes to realize what was going on. I then could see the ground down below moving. And when I looked down, I say down because when I looked out the window, it looked like I was about 500 feet up, looking down. And I'm looking down, and the ground is just moving. And we going, actually, we wasn't going this way. It was like we was going this way. And then all of a sudden, I'm looking down. I must have had to be on the side of the ship because I'm looking this way, and the ground is moving this way. And I'm like, look at the ground, it's moving. I then dropped my head and was telling myself, this can't be happening. You know, no. I then ran over with, I had this quick thought in my head, and I raised up and jumped up. I'm saying to myself, no, man, no. I then looked out the window again, and I could see the opening and the land down below. And the color of the ground of the land was brown, and I then looked out and again I could see animals running. And when I looked down, I'm seeing animals. I'm like, animals, you know? And I'm looking, and all of a sudden I'm seeing zebras, and I'm like, zebras, and then I'm seeing giraffes, and and then that really let me know that, hey, wait a minute now, I know where I'm at now. I was like, giraffes and zebras and animals, thousands of animals running. First thing that came, I didn't have to think about where I was. I just knew what I was looking at. I was like, no, this is Africa. I'm looking down. The only place I know they got animals like that is Africa. And I started to get dizzy. I'm staring out the window and I'm, oh no. I then remember I stared out the window and again for a while and watched, and in an instant I looked around and I just saw the pyramids just pass me by just like that. And my eyes stared in the most amazement, like, oh my Jesus. And I panicked. Something crazy. I panicked. I literally panicked. I remember running and saying to myself, no. I was running around this thing saying, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I was like, please take me home. Please take me home. Take me home. And I watched out the window as the land just, the ground down below just was going swiftly by. And yet I didn't feel no vibrations. I didn't feel no falling. I could walk straight. I could feel a tremendous force. Whatever this was, it was like it if you ever rode in a Porsche has that same feeling. Like it's real tight. Like it's real, like woo, like, but this one was like, you could feel the tightness of whatever this was. And we was traveling this, I can't even imagine the speed, and I could see, I could look out, and I couldn't feel a thing. I didn't feel no pressure. I didn't feel nothing. No vibration. There was no noise. I then went over and I sat in the chair. I was dazed. I was like dazed. Literally dazed. When I came to, I was back in my backyard. And I just stood there. Looking, staring back into the woods. I was like, oh, thank you. I wanted to be there, but I wanted to be here too. I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I don't know. I didn't. But at that time, I didn't want to leave my mother, my family, nobody. I stood there for a long time and I couldn't believe what had just happened to me. As I stood there, my feelings calmed down until I was just like numb. I then had the strangest feeling. I had the feeling that I wasn't going to have any more encounters. I wasn't going to have no more visitations. I was going to be able to sleep. No more sleepless nights. And I was very unhappy after that. After that night, I didn't have any more. There were none. The years went by. No stars, no visitations that I can recall of. Not even a sign. I've been left with an empty feeling. I've gone on with my life. I'm now going on 53. Not 53 yet, but I will be. I have 4 kids, 4 grown-ups. I have told each one of them about my encounters, but they think I'm crazy. I begin to wonder myself. To this day, I still search the skies looking, hoping that in this present time I will see or have an encounter to let me know that those years in my life were not just dreams or some wild fantasy. Now, my life went on, and for years, and years clicked on by, I'm still left with that feeling of something in my life, but I can't find what it is. I've been searching for my purpose. I've searched in the Bible. I've read the Bible maybe 4 or 5 times from front to the end. I keep my belief in God and Jesus. And I keep on living. I have not had any more visitation since, I say visitation, but I say encounters. No encounters, not even a dream. It gives me a lonely feeling, you know. Now, I just sit and stare into the skies. I always say to myself, maybe I was just in the wrong location, or maybe it was just a dream. But I still continue to look to the skies.